Hi, my name is Eric Douglas with the Midwest District of the Evangelical Free Church, and today we're going to be talking about flow in a worship service. Let me ask you a question. What's the difference between a river and a lake? Well, a river has banks that channel the water in a particular direction, while a lake is just a pool of water sitting there. This picture encapsulates the idea of having a flow in your service, of having a reason, a direction, a purpose for why you do what you do when you gather. So I want to give you a template that I use most of the time in how I construct a worship service. And I will say that this is just one of many ways that you can put together a service. But however you do it, have a reason, have a purpose behind it. This template comes from Isaiah's encounter with God in Isaiah 6. So let's briefly walk through this passage. In the first 4 verses, Isaiah sees God for who he is. In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord high and exalted, seated on a throne, and the train of his robe filled the temple. Above him were seraphim, each with 6 wings. With 2 wings they covered their faces, with 2 they covered their feet, and with 2 they were flying. And they were calling to one another, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord Almighty. The whole earth is full of his glory. At the sound of their voices, the doorposts and threshold shook, and the temple was filled with smoke. God gives Isaiah a vision of himself. And in seeing who God is, Isaiah sees himself and who he is not. Woe to me, I cried. I am ruined, for I am a man of unclean lips, and I live among a people of unclean lips. And my eyes have seen the King, the Lord Almighty. Isaiah acknowledges his sinfulness, but God provides a way for Isaiah's sin to be dealt with, and Isaiah receives God's forgiveness. Then one of the seraphim flew to me with a live coal in his hand, which he had taken with tongs from the altar. With it he touched my mouth and said, See, this has touched your lips. Your guilt is taken away, and your sin atoned for. And just like God provided a way for Isaiah's sin to be forgiven through Jesus Christ, God has provided for us a way for our sin to be dealt with as well. Then Isaiah properly responds to God. Then I heard the voice of the Lord saying, Whom shall I send? And who will go for us? And I said, Here I am, send me. Isaiah responds to God and offers his life that God has redeemed in service to the King. Finally, Isaiah listens to God and obeys. Verses 9 and 10 are God's instructions to Isaiah, in which Isaiah is to go and obey. Like I said, this flow of worship is pretty typical of the services that I lead from week to week. Seeing God for who he is, seeing us for who we are, remembering what Christ has done, responding properly, and listening to what God says and obeying. So let's walk through an example of what a service following this flow of worship looks like. We begin the service by reading from Revelation 4. This passage paints a picture of the throne room in heaven. Following that, we sing Revelation song, which puts to music the ideas we just read about. As we are reflecting on who God is, we sing Before the Throne of God Above, reminding us that before God, even though we have sinned, Jesus has saved us. Verse 2 of the song says, Because the sinless Savior died, my sinful soul is counted free. For God the just is satisfied to look on him and pardon me. In this song, we are walking through the aspects of seeing God, seeing ourselves and our sin, and remembering what Jesus has done for us. After this, the proper response is surrender, and we sing from the inside out, asking God to change our hearts so that our lives would be different. We then worship through giving and the message, listening to God speak through his word, and close the service with Lord, I need you, as a cry to God that he would give us his strength to live for him and obey him this next week. One of the reasons I like this flow of worship so much is because it's not only just a flow of worship, but it's also how we respond to the gospel. At one time, we had to see God for who he is. We had to see our sin, and we heard what God has done for us in Jesus Christ. We received that salvation, that forgiveness, and properly responded to him with surrendering our lives. And now we are listening to God and obeying day after day. Worship is the proper response to who God is, what he has done, and what he has said. So let's plan our services to remind people of these truths in a way that doesn't just sit there like a lake, but channels them in a particular direction. Let us plan services that flow.